My name is Tom Pankratz. I'm a former director of the IDA and the editor of the Water Desalination Report. The IDA is a technical trade organization with a goal of encouraging research, development, and the appropriate utilization of desalination and water reuse technologies. Today's IDA represents the coming together of two organizations in the 1980s, the International Desalination and Environmental Association and the National Water Supply and Improvement Association. Today we're in San Diego at the IDA's biannual World Congress, where we're going to be interviewing some desal industry veterans. This is part of a program funded by Faith Leitner in honor of her late father, Gordon Leitner, an industry veteran and a mentor to many of us. Gordon was a former IDA president and the founding editor of the organization's Desal and Water Reuse Quarterly. Today we're going to be visiting with three veteran desalters. The gentlemen on my left are all Envirogenics alumni. To my immediate left is Kurt Kiefer, Haney Saeed, and Ali Kalantar. And with that, let's invite each of you to give a brief background on your career. What got you involved in desalination, a little bit about the jobs you've held, and what you're doing today.
All right. Well, I had kind of a tortuous path getting into desalination. I actually started off by majoring in physics at Georgia Tech and working for NASA as a co-op student for a couple of semesters, and I was interested to be an astronaut, but at that time they already announced the end of the lunar missions and everything. So other than that, the next thing was to do was Skylab, which the astronauts were going to go up into space, and NASA was going to measure how quickly their bodies deteriorated. And I decided that maybe I wanted to change career paths at that point. And so at that time, some of the astronauts were getting into this, it was called C-Lab, and it was living on the continental shelf offshore. And so at the same time, my father told me about a program at FAU in ocean engineering. So I graduated with a degree in ocean engineering, and my first job out of college was going to work with DSS engineers, which stood for Desalination Systems and Services. And so, in fact, both Ali and I worked there along with Don Hornberg and O.J. Morin and Bill Surratt and Bob Bailey and actually, Ed Cedar, I don't know if many people know that, but Ed Cedar of the famous Cedar-Tate equation also was affiliated with DSS for a while as well. So at any rate, at the time, DSS was working on a project for developing energy-intensive processes in association with offshore thermal energy projects. And one of the things they were looking at was actually extracting minerals from seawater using freeze desalination.
What year was that when you joined?
I joined in 1975.
Okay.
I was right out of college into DSS. And so DSS was actually working on a number of energy research projects at the time. In addition to the ocean thermal energy, we worked on a geothermal energy project. And then within the first couple of years working with DSS, that was the time that desalination really took off in the Middle East. And, you know, right out of the gate, I mean, we basically, we won projects for Farrasun, for Aleth, for Alberk, Al Jubail Phase 2, Khafji. And so 3 years out of college, you know, I found myself working on the largest desalination plant in the world, you know, which depending on what top temperature it was operated at, could either produce 240 million gallons a day or 260 million gallons a day. So, so it was quite an experience. In fact, you know, I was probably a little young at that time to realize what a milestone it was, because, you know, I think at that time, Envirogenics actually had the largest thermal desalination plant in the world at like 60 million gallons a day for Jetta 4. And so that's a huge incremental leap going from 60 to 260 MGD.
Now, was DSS the owner's engineer? Were you the
We were the owner's engineer. We were actually subcontractors. Our scope was the design of the desal units. Catalytic and Culgen were the main sort of consultants. And of course, the project was so big that there was no one contractor in the world at that time that could actually execute the project in the time schedule that Saline Water Conversion Corporation wanted it constructed. So they actually broke the project into 4 major contracts, and Sasakura won 2 of those. And then Hitachi Zosen, which was a licensee of Westinghouse, won the 3rd one, and IHI won the 4th one.
But you were saying, so then you were at DSS, and from there?
Well, actually, from there, I kind of got, it seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime at the time, but it was one of those things that a company called Aquatic Technology, which actually Serge Latour came to work with DSS, and he was the first water treatment plant operator at Rotunda West, which was one of the first RO plants in Florida. And he kind of, from that point, DSS started to get into reverse osmosis more, although the strong emphasis was still on thermal. But at any rate, Aquatic Technologies made me an offer that was like a 30% increase in salary. I could instantly become engineering manager, and they gave me almost the car of my company car of my choice. So it was kind of hard to turn down, but as in a lot of things, it was kind of too good to be true. And a year later, I was kind of looking for a job, and I just happened to be on the phone talking about a project in the Middle East that Ali was getting ready to bid on, and he mentioned that the Envirogenic Systems Company was looking for a proposal manager for reverse osmosis projects. So, it was a great opportunity for me. I got to work with these 2 great guys and a lot of tremendous people at Envirogenics, Bob Kadaj, Dieter Emmerman, Cecil Hughes, Harbans Coley, who was like the brains of the operation as far as the reverse osmosis processes went. And we did a number of great projects, and we'll all get to talk about those at Envirogenics. But I happened to be coming back from a trip over to the Middle East, and I stopped in to visit my old buddies at DSS on my way back, and they said, well, we've just been purchased by a big company, Stone & Webster, and so we'd like for you to come back and work for us. And at that time, again, it was like getting a 30% increase in salary, because when you looked at the cost of buying a home in California and I already had a home in Florida, so it was like getting a huge increase, and it was too hard to turn down. So I worked also, and I was working with a lot of my friends, Bill Surratt and Jeff Hart from DSS, and Don Hornberg, of course, and OJ. OJ was with us there too at Stone & Webster. And unfortunately, when I was with Stone & Webster, we won the large Tampa desal project, but because of some financial problems that Stone & Webster had on other projects around the world, we were never actually fortunate enough to take it much beyond the design phase. So that was
one of the biggest names.
That was
in
one
the
of the
business.
heartbreakers. That was almost as big as not getting Cape Coral.
Yes.
But at any rate, after Stone & Webster I went to work, actually Bill Srott recommended that CDM interview me, and so I went to, was successful. Basically, Bill wanted to take a little less of a role. He was kind of, I think, positioning himself as for retirement at that point, and kind of, I think, was nice enough to recommend me as sort of his, successor there. So, and I stepped right into the, Boca Raton 40 MGD, largest nanofiltration plant in the world, and it's just been a great run with CDM Smith since then. I've worked on fantastic projects all around the world.
Well, one of the names you mentioned caught me off guard, and that's Serge Latour.
Yes.
He's a goat farmer from South Georgia or Florida Panhandle.
Well,
he's a great guy. It's just, I remember he always kept some goats. So.
Yeah, I think he was from up north, and he got the job at Rotunda West, and he was pretty active in RO there for a while, and then he did take a job up in South Georgia, and I hardly heard from him again after that. It's
a name from the past. Well, good. And I'm gonna skip to Allie and then come to Haney. But Allie, what would you pick up a little bit on your history?
Well, I was born in Iran and moved to this country at the age of 16. So I finished my high school here. And I was very lucky to get into UCLA, studied chemical engineering at UCLA, and got my master's degree at Loyola Marymount, which is just on the other side of the town, in civil engineering. And never knew anything about desalination, had no idea what desalination was all about. And we used to call it desalinization at the time, by the way. And so I took a stab of going back home, and I was there for about a year or so. Before I went home, I married a woman who went to USC across town, who was from Kuwait, actually. So when I finished my education, I went back to Iran with her, and she convinced me to move to Kuwait. So after a year being in Iran, we moved to Kuwait, and Kuwait was the center of desalination at the time, believe it or not. And I was offered a job with Ministry of Electricity and Water, and was very lucky to work with a gentleman by the name of Jim Reside. Many of you guys probably know Jim Reside. Mm-hmm. Jim Reside was a United Nations expert that was working in Kuwait at an organization called Water Resources Development Center, who really had a bunch of very, very good people that were helping the government of Kuwait develop its desalination inventory, because they needed water. And the Kuwaitis really were, in my opinion, the pioneers in allowing desalination, especially multi-stage flash, to flourish.
Well, I think they had the first commercial MSF units in Kuwait, didn't they? In the 56 or 7, something like that?
Yeah, well, they built, we Westgard built the 2 first commercial 1 MGD plants in Shuaik, and they were F1 and F2, and those 2 plants were the start of the desalination, overall desalination projects that they had in Kuwait. And after that, of course, Sasakura built a lot more in Doha area and all that stuff. So I was in this center, and Water Resources Development Center, and it's amazing the kind of training that I received. Because we were given everything we wanted to do whatever we want, make changes to design of plants, whatever. And so it was an unbelievable run for me to be in that position, work with these guys that had all kinds of experience, especially Jim Reside, who's passed away since. And what a wonderful gentleman. Mm-hmm. And so then after being in Kuwait for about 3 years, I decided that I wanted to go back to the U.S. So I came back to the U.S. and I said, don't want to work. I just want to go get my MBA. So I was in the middle of my MBA program back in Los Angeles that I got a call from Don Hornberg asking me if I'm interested to go and work for him. Now I met Don someplace in a when I was working in Kuwait. I might have met him in one of those conferences. I can't remember where, but either I met him or somebody introduced him to me. So I went for an interview, and he hired me at DSS. So that was in about 1978, in that neighborhood. When I got into when I was hired at DSS, my immediate boss was O.J. Morin, and O.J. was Kurt's boss, my boss. He ran all of the engineering stuff, and good old Don Hornberg was the sales and marketing guy. He was traveling all the time, bringing business in. But you know, in reality, DSS did everything. If you worked at DSS, you had to do everything. Don Hornberg used to send us, for instance, to do Probolog. You know what Probolog is? You know?
No.
He would send us to, for instance, to these nuclear power plants, where you actually put in a probe through the tubes, and you slowly pull it to see if there are any pinholes or anything like that. So that was something that we had to do as engineers anyway, because that was a supplemental business for DSS that was bringing some cash in.
Yeah, I actually almost managed to electrocute myself at the Abu Dhabi town station, because we had to crawl in those evaporators, and we were like doing non-destructive testing. You know, we had to go in and take sonic measurements of the thickness of all the walls, and then we did the eddy current inspection on all the tubes. Well, we had to drag a grinder and one of those drop lights into the evaporators, and of course the electrical, you know, the electrical work there at the time was, well, you just strip the ends of the wires and you just stick them in a socket. And anyway, I was in the evaporator, and I needed more length on the light, and I grabbed it, and I guess the wire came loose. Evaporator, threw it out of my hand, and I thought I was a goner. But anyway, but it was kind of interesting, because a lot of that inspection work was critical. And you know, we did inspections on the Blue Hills MSF plant, and also the Abu Dhabi town station. And based on a lot of that, the results of a lot of that testing, we kind of took the lessons learned and applied it to Al Jubail Phase 2. So I'm sorry I didn't.
No, that's good. That's good. So
You don't want to miss those opportunities.
I tell you, I think one of the most important thing about DSS, and it basically very similar to the experience that I received later on when I started to work for Envirogenics, is that because, at least at DSS, because we were only a few people, I think the whole DSS was about 10 guys. And the good thing about being in a company like that is that you were expected to do everything. And there was a lot of independent work that we had to do. You know, like they will send you to a site by yourself in the middle of nowhere, and you were just on your own, you know, just go and do that. So in addition, I think, in my opinion, of course, is that I had a great teacher. I really learned a lot from O.J. Morin.
I learned today that a lot of people used to call him Butch.
Yeah.
Early on. Yeah, I think that already had passed by the time we got to DSS. But yeah, I found out.
O.J. was unbelievable, because here I am, a very young engineer. He would come to my office and give me drawings, about 200 sheets of drawings on an Al Jubail project from various contractors, to review all of these and throw them on my desk. And I'm saying, my God, how am I going to do this, you know? And so we would go through these drawings review, because we were consultants, and we had to review those drawings and prove them and everything else. And of course, when I took it back to him, he would sit down with me and go through every single one of them. Oh, you missed here. You did this. Why didn't you look at that? So it was just an amazing ride for us, how much we learned from working at DSS. And also, the other thing that were very important at DSS, of course, because of the small group of people that we were, is that I learned a lot in doing international business as well. It's very important, because our business is so much dependent on international business. So Don Hornberg sent me to Saudi Arabia many times. And just to bring you one very interesting story, is that we were sent to build a desalination plant and a small town on an island of Farazan. Now, the story of island of Farazan is very interesting. Island of Farazan was actually a prison in Saudi Arabia for many years. The Saudis used to, and my friends, the Saudi friends, when they hear that, they're going to laugh about it. And many of them don't know this. But this is the truth. They used to take their prisoners. The Coast Guard boat would take him to this island and tell him, get out. Yalla, yalla. You know.
Yalla.
So that's what they did with many, many prisoners. And that population grew. And one day there was a letter sent to the king of Saudi Arabia at the time from the prince of Farazan, who was an ex-prisoner, I guess, I don't know, saying, look, we have about 20,000 people here. We have no water. We have nothing. Can you do something for us? So at the time, Prince Mohammed was the guy who was in charge of SWEC. Prince Mohammed, of course, was very important because he really looked at desalination. He's the gentleman that looked at moving icebergs from, remember that, those projects and all that. So he placed a call to Hornberg saying, come down, I want to talk to you about a very important project. And Hornberg went down, and later on, OJ and I went down. And I'd never forget in a meeting where Prince Mohammed told us, you're going to go to Jizan, and you're going to look for the Coast Guard boat, and I want you to go on this boat, and it's going to take you to this island called Jizan. Now, when you get there, I don't know what to expect. You will have. I just want to build I want to build a desalination plant. I want to have a mosque. I want to have some housing for these people. So, he said that I just want to warn you, if you have boots, wear boots because there are snakes there as well. And there are no hotels, so you have to sleep outside. So that's what happened. We went there. OJ, I'm looking, young engineer, looking at OJ. I said, do you really want me to do this, OJ? So that's how it started. It's amazing. We went into this place, and 2 years later, we built. This is amazing. This is, for me, it was one of the best time of my life because I spent quite a bit of time on that island. We built a town for these guys. We put 2 croup units. I think they were about 1,000 cubic meters per day each, if you remember that.
Yeah, they were small.
Yeah,
Like-
small.
like
Once through
120,000
decided MSF plants that Krupp built, skid mounted, storage tank, a mosque, all of that. We built all of that. In fact, the Korean contractor was the existing Doosan at the time. They used to be called something else. And when I finished that job, when we finished that job, one of the most satisfying things was that we were invited to a feast at the local town to thank us for the work that we had done. And I never forget that night. There was a big, huge dinner. We all had to sit on the floor. And there was dinner there for all of us. And the prince was sitting at the top of the place on the ground. And I had my plate in front of me. I was there, OJ was there. We had an Egyptian engineer that spent many, many months there, and I thought toward the end he was not very normal anymore.
You were not normal if you think it was the best days of your life being in Farazan.
And I never forget that reception, because the prince used to pick up food with his hand and throw it on my dish, my plate. And he had such and the food would land right on my dish, even though I was like 6 feet away from him. So it was very satisfying to see that we had done something for these people. They were so happy that. So that was anyway. This is a kind of experience that I got working for DSS, and of course later on there was an opportunity for me with Cecil Hughes. By the way, we never mentioned Cecil Hughes at Envirogenics.
I did mention.
You did?
I think I
Okay.
did in the introduction.
Yeah, Cecil Hughes was he was a vice president of thermal engineering at Envirogenics, and he called me up and asked me if I'd be interested to move to LA and work as a proposal manager in their thermal group because of my background working in Kuwait for 3 years. And then later on, of course, at the time when I was working at DSS, their focus was only thermal engineering, thermal processes, desalination. So that's how I started I actually grew up in LA area, and so I went back to LA and started with Envirogenics and met this gentleman and Robert Kadaj and many others, Harvan Scully and all of those guys, Bob Tidball. Everybody was there at the time. And of course, later on, Kurt joined us as well. And Kurt has gone over a lot of stuff that we done at Envirogenics. But Envirogenics was a pioneer in a lot of stuff that they did also in thermal processes, because they built, on an MED side, for instance, they were the first companies, in my opinion, that built a large MED plant, for instance, in St. Thomas, even though there was a lot of design flaw in it. But there was no, Envirogenics had a team that took a lot of risk in doing things. A lot of risk that I think in the present way, the way we do business, we will never take, because we always want to go into building a smaller scale plant and then maybe piloting things, and that did not exist at Envirogenics. Envirogenics would go after projects that had certain things that they had never done, but they still put together a design and will go ahead and do it. And that plant that we built, for instance, in St. Thomas, was a disaster, because we never met the total capacity requirement. We never met the guaranteed performance ratio that we had sold to them. I don't know what happened toward the end, but it was a settlement, for Envirogen. But the reason why I brought that up is that we learned a lot from mistakes that we made. And when I look at it now at Envirogenics, at least on the thermal side, is that I think if it wasn't for those things, we wouldn't have learned a lot more, and we wouldn't have come up with all these new ideas that are now you see now. And so I was at Envirogenics for many years. I was with Envirogenics for about 6-7 years, and one day when business was not going well, because Envirogenics was sold to a company called Sojix out of Paris. They were the ones that did they contracted Jeddah 4, the 50 MGD MSF and 500 megawatt of power. That project really brought Envirogenics down. I remember I got involved toward the end of that project on trying to recuperate the
Down payment.
it wasn't the down payment, it was the retention. It was an $800 million project.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the retention on that project was $80 million. And it was for some reason that I can't really tell now, but there was a problem in trying to collect that $80 million. And for a company of that size, that $80 million was, in my opinion, one of the reasons why Envirogenics did not survive.
I think a big factor, one of the things that always concerned me is it didn't seem like Envirogenics really had control of their own destiny.
Yeah.
They were always, all the money went through Sojix.
Sojix.
And Sojix would just dole out the money to Envirogenics.
Okay.
So then I moved on from there. Of course, Heaney, myself, and Robert Kadaj started a new business called American Engineering Services after we all left. And that, of course, Robert, of course, passed away, and Heaney moved on to start another business. And then in 2005, we sold American Engineering Services to Doosan, and I stayed with Doosan for so many years. And I'm happy to say that now Heaney and I are partners again, and we started a company called Pacific Aqua Technologies, and we're doing pretty well as well.
Good. Well, that's a good segue to Haney. If you'd provide us with your background and tell us how this all fits together here.
Well, it's similar to Ali. I came from Egypt with my parents at the age of 15. because we left Egypt, at the time, you couldn't take more than $20, okay, per person out of the country. So although the family was very well off, so when we came here, my father had to work till he get his license as an orderly in the hospital. He was a doctor. So all of us had to work while we're going to school. So while I was going to college, I was working, worked many jobs, dishwashers, paper runs and so forth like that. And one time I found an ad in the paper about a technician for Envirogenics. So I went and worked. It turned out to be a technician to rolling membranes at Envirogenics. So I got the job, and when Bob Tidball found out that I'm going to engineering school, so
What year was that when you went to work?
that was in 1973.
Okay.
He promoted me to a test engineer. So I ended up from being on the rolling machine to basically be in charge of all the testing of every membrane that's being done. And so after I graduated, that's when I started working for Sherman May, which he taught me how to calculate, the membranes and so forth like that. And then after that, I worked for with Bob Tidball a lot. And at that time, we had the RO group and the thermal group.
That's always an interesting tension that exists.
Yeah.
Because and a lot of us in the industry have experienced that. You start out as a membrane guy or thermal guy, and you end up a membrane guy, or vice versa. So, how was it being a membrane guy around these thermal guys?
Okay, we were looked on to as, you guys are the,
Stepchild.
Yeah, the stepchild of the thing. You don't know what you're doing. These are small plants, and we're in charge of the big plants, and and Cecil Hughes, being British, and then Dieter Emmerman being German. They had a certain style to the business, and they were always kind of,
And they were both primarily thermal guys.
Thermal guys.
Yeah.
So we looked at it. Bob kind of Kadaj was the guy that kind of brought the two groups of engineers together in a way, and especially after Ali joined, and then Kurt joined us. So he brought us, and a lot of the times we used to bid the projects both in a thermal and RO on the same bid, because our RO started to kind of take position in the industry where it becoming to be cheaper, than MSF, and a lot of people started looking at it.
So you actually competed against competing bids from the same
we
company?
We actually put in competing bids, for the same project.
Although we probably looked at it more like alternates.
Alternate
We
bids.
could either do a MSF or we could do it.
On the other hand, also, we had another group, because part of the Sojex group, we had another group that's in Germany, our office in Germany, that will even put a competing offers to us. And I'm sure Kurt will remember the famous times we traveled together to put a bid together. And we go there and we're putting an Envirogenics bid, and all of a sudden we were told, oh, no, wait a minute, we already have a bid ready. Forget what you guys are doing, and the German office is doing it. And we had a lot of those competitions, so we almost had to really hone in our designs and work hard to be able to put the best proposal. And at that time, it wasn't the proposal, it was not just putting a proposal of putting the RO system together. It was a turnkey proposal. It was including civil, it was including the intake, it was including the outfall, okay? And at that time, everybody worked together. At times, nobody went home. Everybody worked all night long, okay? And everybody did whatever is missing. If somebody had finished his part, okay, he pitched in to do others. We always will sit down around the table, get the PNID done, okay, get the process done, and we will, challenge each other, and Bob always, and Kurt was always, like Bob always had this thing is, why is this? Why can't we do it a bit cheaper? Why can't we increase the flux? Why can't we increase the velocity through the filters and so forth like that? And poor Harbans used to sit there and everybody will hit on him on the process, and Bob will hit on the engineering hours and so forth like that. And we were sitting as a group, working constantly and honing in the numbers and so forth like that. And at the end of the day, somebody will be traveling with Bob, okay? And during those days, there was no faxes. There was nothing. There was the telex that we had to send information through telex and so forth like that. And Bob would end up writing the cover letter, on a small typewriter that he always had. But it was the team effort that was just amazing. There was this set of people that was at Envirogenics that was, they come to work, you work hard, you don't know whether at the end of the day, whether you're gonna get on a plane or not. You find if you are asked to go, you never thought that you had a choice whether to go or not to go. You just go. You get on a plane, doesn't make any difference. You go, either you go on to work on a proposal or go on a project or go on a oil platform to start a project for startup and commissioning. It just did not make a difference what you are asked to do. You just do what you had to do. And that was the beauty of the group that we had. It was just an amazing group.
But just to touch on that, the competition between the two groups, I think what bridged them is basically Kurt and I, because we came in from both backgrounds and we bridged. I was the proposal manager. Actually, Kurt was working for me. Right. And we brought the two groups together, and for the first time we started to think about the company, not which group is going to win. I mean, if we get this project, the whole company is going to benefit. It wasn't like if we get this project, the thermal process group is going to be the winner. Really, that kind of culture existed.
A healthy competition that existed.
Well, I mean, I having the thermal background as well, if they were working on a really big thermal project and we were not really bidding that many RO projects, I'd help them do material takeoffs and things like that.
That's correct.
And the common engineer, the mechanical, electrical, and instrumentation and process would be working for both. Mm-hmm. It was not, we didn't have duplication. Yeah. It was streamlined.
But there were certain people that were not convertible. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I can use the right word. Not convertible. Cecil Hughes, okay, Dieter Emmerman. These two they never had any confidence in reverse osmosis technology until the last day I worked with these guys. Never thought that this is a technology that can evolve, because they were like, I would say thermal processes were embedded in their brain. There was nothing else. There was not enough room left in their brain to accept any other technology. So those guys were never converted.
You know, they were working on projects like Jetta 4, 60
Yeah.
MGD, and we're trying to sell, 1-2 million
2
gallons.
billion gallons a day.
Yeah.
So
Well-
they kind of looked at us like, "Are you guys kidding us? Why are we bothering?"
Well, and Dieter Emmerman, who just passed away,
Right.
and we've just all talked about him
Yeah.
in the last couple of months. And I didn't know him only by reputation, but he right to the end he was still working on thermal stuff.
Yes.
Just recently. So
Well, I have to tell you, Dieter Emmerman, you know that there's a huge transition as to how the MSF technology went forward. We started with 1 MGD and then we built 3 MGD and 5 MGD. It's only recently in the last 10 years when you see this huge size plants of one module being 20 MGD, MIGD. And after Envirogenics fell apart, Dieter Emmerman actually joined at the time Korea Heavy Industry and helped them develop that design. Okay, he spent a lot of time there, and KHIC at the time, Korea Heavy Industry, was responsible for building some of these mega plants, and those mega plants were like 10 MGD, and now of course the latest design that they had for Al Khair, Ras Al Khair, those are like 20 MGD each. So when you're talking about Dieter made a lot of contribution to thermal processes, especially on an MSF side.
well, and going back to DSS days, the DSS guys of that you were the company you were a part of has spawned a lot of guys who've been around, and the company still exists. I mean, I know DSS actually split into a couple of companies, I guess, one of which was, I think the original DSS was bought by John Toner.
Yes.
And he continued it as a consultancy. He actually acquired the assets from Don shortly before his death. But there's some other companies that started as, weren't there, or I'm asking, were there offshoots that led some
Well,
other?
I think Don, of course, when OJ left Stone & Webster, he kind of started his own consultancy. And
I guess
he
maybe that's
used
what
the
I think.
DSS in the name. And,
excuse me.
of course, Don had a couple of companies. He was Water Consultants International as well.
Okay,
So-
I guess that's right. I'm looking at some of the name changes followed Don.
I just wanted to mention one thing. I think it came up before, but I think the glue that really kind of held Envirogenics together was Bob Kadaj, and I think everybody here all
Yes.
agree that like Bob was probably the hardest working, most dedicated individual that we knew.
Yes.
And I think part of the reason for that is that Bob really looked at Envirogenics like his family. And so
Well,
he worked that hard to keep them together. And I also wanted to just say that I think one of the reasons that Haney and Howley have been so successful as well is because they treat the people in their companies like family as well. So.
Well,
Thank you, Kurt.
and you can just look at
Kurt.
Haney's background as an entrepreneur. You started several companies and people followed you.
Well, it's actually, it's all like Kurt said. It started with Bob. Bob is the one that got us together, Ali and I, and we started the company together, AES. He's the one that encouraged. I learned a lot from Bob. I learned how to put the proposals together. I learned how to negotiate together. People say how to negotiate with vendors and so forth like that, and how to make money on projects. I learned that from Bob, okay? I learned from Bob, never give up, okay? And when we started AES, okay, that's what we have done. We went and never give up. People would never give us a chance to bid any projects, but we didn't quit. We went after it. And AES became a very successful company. And if I have any regrets whatsoever is that Bob did not live long enough to see the fruits of the seeds that he planted, because AES flourished, okay, and it became Doosan, okay, and Ali was the CEO of Doosan.
And speaking of Doosan, I think right now Doosan is one of the biggest, or it changes from year to year, but maybe has the biggest technology provider in the certainly the seawater desal side, because of the big MSF technology projects they do and the big RO projects they've done as a result of the reference list that AES
had, yes.
So,
In both technologies, whether it was MSF technology that they were able to go and market and build the large ones, all of that came as a licensee of Envirogenics. And then later on, of course, the RO technology was given to them by AES. And so when they actually acquired AES in 2005, they had 0 installation. And now, as we speak, they're the largest provider of seawater RO plant in the world, 40% of the market. It's kind of satisfying to know that you had something to do with that.
It's got to be.
Well, from AES, we moved on to started Advanced Environmental Water Technologies, and we ended up actually at one time AEWT had the largest installed membrane capacity in the United States.
Oh yeah, I remember some of your numbers. You were involved in how many million gallons a day or something?
One of the plants that we have built is the Boca Raton, which is 40 MGD.
Yeah.
And I contribute that to a lot of my friends and colleagues that have given me the chance and believed in me. And one of them is sitting right here, okay? People like Peter Lange and Ian Watson, and those people that really gave me the chance, that if it wasn't for them, I don't think I would have made it. And God has been great to me. And we went on, and in 2005, it's just amazing that the dates corresponded with each other. AES is sold to Doosan, and AEWT was acquired by Bywater. And I stayed on with Bywater for 7 years as CEO. And then, again, Ali's famous visit to my house. Okay, after I retired from Bywater, Ali visits my house and
conspired with your wife.
And here you are.
And he conspired with my wife to get me out of retirement, and here we are, started Pacific Aqua Technologies together again.
Yeah, I've written about your retirement twice already.
Yes.
You should get the awards back.
Yeah,
Remember, you give him an award too.
You should get a record for shortest retirement.
Yes.
You and Harbon.
Yes.
Yeah, Harbon's too. That's right.
Harbon's actually had a lot to do with the success of Envirogenics, and we're great friends. He was one of the few people that when I won a project, he would be the first to call me and congratulate me. And the same with here.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Harbons, everywhere he has gone, everywhere. He was at Envirogenics. Everywhere he went, he caused those companies to really flourish. And of course, he was for years with H2O Innovation, right?
Yeah.
And H2O Innovation started with Harbons joining them,
and I think
a bunch of ex-hydronautics guys, and he was the one who did a lot of work for them.
I think H2O Innovation, in fact, I just saw the lineup of the top 20 equipment companies for the past year, and H2O Innovation went from 20th to about 16.
Yeah.
So, I mean, which is pretty remarkable for a young company,
Right.
and as you said, it's a lot of it's attributed to to the work that Harbans has done.
And
Yeah,
one
he was really the brains on
Yeah.
the RO side. He did all the process work. He was
Yes.
like the bridge between
Exactly.
the process and membrane, the membrane development, the research part of envirogenics. And then he also followed up and monitored the performance of the units in the field and figured out, this is what we need to do better, guys. And he would follow up and make sure it got
I
done.
remember when we got the job for Duba and Hackle, okay? We, again, speaking of going and getting the job and figuring out how we're going to do it later on, which is the team approach at the time. Envirogenics didn't have a seawater membrane, but we went and got the job, okay? And then later on, we said we're going to use Tioba membranes. Harbans, we bought some Tioba membranes and we tested them, and we realized after he tested, we realized that the problem is because it was only a single stage RO, their brine flow rates were very low, and we would have had a problem with concentration polarization. Okay, and we went to Japan and showed them, okay, and we designed one of the I think most successful plants for SWIC was the Duba Hackle plant, because we built that plant into a two-stage design to be able to increase the concentration polarization for the plant, and that was contributed to Harman's work.
Well, as we're getting close to the session, I'd like each of you to just quickly, is there anybody that we haven't mentioned yet that should be recognized, or even a company or a person, and any last thoughts about to contribute here, because in the limited time?
Well, I guess my last thoughts are really that, I don't know if we really talked enough about, we talked about Don Hornberg and O.J. Morin, but those are guys that really did pioneering desal technology work. And I think, you look at the 50s and the 60s, and that was the era when, the U.S. was really, developing all of this technology. That's when a lot of the patents for MSF, MED, vertical tube, all of those. And I kind of envy those guys in a way, because at that time, we still had a lot of factories that were building process equipment. And so, like Don Hornberg and OJ, they had these nomographs. So, this is what we did this is the heat transfer coefficient that we determined, for different sizes and different geometries and configurations, and the whole, should this be long tube or this be cross tube, and those guys did a lot of pioneering work in the development of that, and I think they had the advantage of that. They could design something, they could go back in the back and see it get built, and then they could test it, and then kind of like debug it and troubleshoot it. And I think by the time a lot that we got in the business, then we were designing the equipment, but if you really wanted to see it get built, you were going over to the Middle East. You weren't going, you weren't going to see it built in your shop, because at that time there was just so much international competition. But
no, I agree with you. They're both great guys. And OJ, as we sit here today, he couldn't come out here for a couple of reasons, but one is he's doing some work right now on a project that I'm working with him on, where he's serving as a lender's engineer.
Yeah.
And he's looking at one of the huge projects that's undergoing right now. He's looking at the drawings, so
yeah.
he's still involved.
And as Ali mentioned, he was just a great guy to work for, and he's the main reason I got into desalination, really.
Good. Ali?
One of the other people that also is Peter Lang. Peter Lang was the main guy that basically had worked on the original Jeddah 4 MSF design. He was based in Germany at the time with DMAC, which was the licensee of Envirogenics at the time. And he saw the engineering and the process design of the desalination of the Jeddah 4. And then he came over to Envirogenics and made the switch over to membranes, which was, you know, an amazing switching from MSF to membrane. And he continued his membrane work at Envirogenics and then switching over to hydronautics, okay, and then switching over to CDM and the consulting side. So he kind of had a great career in the business.
Well balanced, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, he did just a little bit of everything.
Good. Ellie.
Well, you know, I like to mention an organization rather than a person.
Good.
And I believe that a Cell and Water Conversion Corporation in Saudi Arabia should be given a lot of credit, and people like Essam Jamjoom, I don't know if you knew the gentleman that was the vice governor at the time. These are the guys that did a lot for the industry. And, you know, they are the ones who put out tenders that for the first time required certain capacities that nobody else had built before. But they were out there, and they really pushed the industry, and I want to thank them for all the work that they have done for our industry.
And they've also done a lot of research too at
Yes,
their
absolutely.
the research facility. It's
Right.
been you know, one of the most aggressive researchers in the industry.
And I have had an opportunity to meet a lot of guys that and forge a friendship with a lot of guys that work at SWIC that were extremely smart people and down to earth, you know, low profile guys that did a good job for the industry, really.
Good. Well, good. Well, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the IDA for taking the time to sit down with us today and to talk about it. It's been very interesting, and wish you all continued success, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.